Order, please. Before we begin the day routine, the subject for this evening's late debate was submitted by the honourable member for King South. Be resolved, the Leader of the Opposition immediately issue an apology to the residents of 70 and 72 Tremaine Crescent in Windsor for his outrageous and incorrect comments made in the House of Assembly last Wednesday afternoon. Be debated this evening at 6 p.m. Begin the day routine presenting and reading petitions. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I have begged leave to table a petition of which the operative clause reads, "We, the undersigned, petition the members of the legislature with regard to the University College of Cape Breton that the full name of Cape Breton be included in the new name of the university. We make this petition in the absence of public participation in the selection of the name currently before the Provincial Assembly. The university grew out of this community. It will thrive by continuing to be identified with the people of this island." Mr. Speaker, petition bears the name of over 3,000 people, and I have affixed my name to it as well.
Petition is tabled. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notice of motion. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, in advance of reading this resolution, through you, I'd like to request permission to do an introduction. Mr. Speaker, in the East Gallery, I'd like to draw the attention of members of the House to Dr. Mary Brooks, who is Professor of Marketing and Transportation at Dalhousie University's School of Business, who's visiting with us today with her husband Mitch, son Nathan, and Ruth Durant. In addition to being a Canada-U.S. Fulbright Scholar at George Mason University in Virginia, Dr. Brooks has held visiting fellow appointments in Singapore and Australia. She is currently the chair of the Committee on International Trade and Transportation of the Transportation Research Board in Washington, D.C. And locally, she is past director of the Halifax International Airport Authority and past vice president of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. And I would ask Dr. Brooks and her companions to rise and receive the warm welcome of the host. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Mary Brooks, a Dalhousie University professor, recently received the prestigious Canada-U.S. Fulbright Award, and whereas the Fulbright program is one of the world's premier academic exchange programs and attracts exceptional scholars from more than 150 countries, and whereas Ms. Brooks is an expert on transportation policy and this winter will be a visiting researcher at George Mason University's School of Public Policy, Operations and Logistics in Washington, D.C., therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Ms. Brooks on her award and wish her well in her academic pursuits at George Mason University. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas National Gypsum Canada Limited of Milford Station, Nova Scotia is one of the province's important foundation industries and has been a key contributor to the economy for half a century by providing well-paid and stable jobs as well as the spin-off benefits to the goods and services sector. And whereas Nova Scotia produces 7% of the world's gypsum, and National Gypsum is a significant contributor to the global community, and whereas the Milford Quarry is the largest gypsum quarry in the world, which is reflected in the success of the company here in Nova Scotia and is a mark of distinction and pride for the province's mining industry and its people. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate National Gypsum for their first 50 years of success in Nova Scotia and recognize the importance of this industry and the mineral resources generally to Nova Scotia's future growth. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Request for waivers, is agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a forum on organ and tissue donation was held last week in Capitol Health, bringing to light once again the fact that for many patients, organ and tissue transplantation offers hope for a healthy, productive life. And whereas although more Nova Scotians are signing donor cards, the need for donations continues to grow. And whereas donated organs and tissues can help save or enhance the quality of life of many, and everyone can consider themselves to be a potential organ or tissue donor, regardless of age. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House and all Nova Scotians take the time to talk with their families and consider giving the gift of life through organ and tissue donation. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Bank of Montreal is forecasting Nova Scotia economy to be one of the third strongest in Canada in 2005, whereas the Bank of Montreal is planning to open at least 80 new in-store branches over the next few years, including a number of them here in Nova Scotia, along with the possibility of the expansion of one current branch and the construction of a brand new, larger Bank of Montreal in Halifax, and whereas banks remain one of this country's leading employers with more than 235,000 working in the industry, providing a net payroll of $16.1 billion. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House acknowledge the significant optimism being shown by the Bank of Montreal toward the province of Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, I respectfully request waiver of notice.
Question for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, once again, in advance of reading this resolution, with your permission, I'd like to do an introduction. In the East Gallery today, I'd like to introduce Rick Tully, Safe Schools Consultant with the Halifax Regional School Board, Blake Nill, Head Coach of the St. Mary's Huskies football team, Steve Summerah, Offensive Coordinator of the Huskies, and Joe Taplin of the RCMP. Mr. Tully, Mr. Summerah, Mr. Nill worked together to coordinate the Tackling Bullying program, a partnership between the Halifax Regional School Board and the St. Mary's Huskies football team. Through their leadership and participation, this program has been successful in reaching thousands of Halifax youth. And Mr. Taplin is involved with the anti-bullying initiatives of the RCMP. Mr. Tully, Mr. Summerah, Mr. Nill, and Mr. Taplin, would you please rise and receive the warm welcome of the House? Little guy on the end. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Halifax Regional School Board has partnered with St. Mary's University football team, the Huskies, to deliver an anti-bullying program called Tackling Bullying. And whereas the Huskies have worked with the school board's Safe Schools program for 3 years to promote pro-social behavior and a commitment to nonviolence. And whereas the Huskies have visited more than 15,000 students throughout the Halifax Regional Municipality, and this year are donating 200 tickets to each home game to deserving students. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House thank the Halifax Regional School Board and the St. Mary's Football Huskies for their partnership to help make our school communities a safe learning environment for students. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member Cole Harbour, some passage on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I believe after me the member from Richmond also has introductions as well for the same group. Mr. Speaker, in our East Gallery today we have officers, correctional officers from NSGEU Local 480 who are here today. You probably saw them and heard them outside. They have very much concerns about the collective bargaining and how it's going, and also around some issues around arbitration and health and safety, which I hope we'll have a chance to talk about some more later. But I wanted to particularly introduce in the East Gallery 5 members of the Correctional Officers Union: Rod McDonald, John Elliott, Margot McLean, Al Paris, and Jason McLean. If they could stand up and be recognized by the House, that would be appreciated.
Welcome our guests to the gallery today. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Justice Critic for the Liberal Caucus, it gives me pleasure also to introduce some of the correction officers from Local 480 of the NSGU that are here, as the House Leader for the NDP has indicated, to express their concerns with how the collective bargaining process is going and some of the outstanding issues that the government appears to be dragging its feet on. And it gives me pleasure today to introduce, and I'd ask them to rise afterwards to be recognized. We have Mitch Simpson, Peter Lloyd, Steve McDonnell, Bob Backman, and Don Wilson. I'd ask them to rise and receive a warm welcome in the House.
Thank you. We welcome our guests to the gallery today. No further introductions. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 120 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Daycare Act.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 120 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Daycare Act.
Give those to the other House leaders. Bill 137, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 120 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Daycare Act.
This bill be read a second time at future date. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it's with pride that I stand here today in the legislature, and it's with pride that we make the following introductions, if I may, prior to introducing this very important bill. And as you know, in the Speaker's Gallery, that we have a large contingent of police officers from all over Nova Scotia. And these police officers are here today with the one thing in mind, and that is to have binding arbitration to give up their right to strike. And Mr. Speaker, I'm going to introduce some of the people, and maybe some members would like to introduce some also. But before I do, I'd just like to say you as a former police officer yourself can appreciate these people traveling from all parts of Nova Scotia to be here today. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce the Executive Officer of the Police Association of Nova Scotia, Mr. Joe Ross. Would you stand, please? And I know the President of the Police Association of Nova Scotia will be introduced at a later date. The Joanne McNeil, is she here? No. Joanne was in the lobby earlier today, and she's with the Municipality Association of Professional Police. That's Halifax Regional Police, expressing her support of the bill that I will be introducing. And at this time, I'd like to say that, again, I appreciate all police officers coming, and I'd just like to have the Cape Breton Regional Police Force, if you would stand up, please, and in the gallery. It's hard to see of all the members. And Mr. Speaker, these 12 gentlemen and ladies drove all the way down from Cape Breton yesterday just to be here today to hear the presentation of introducing this bill. And Mr. Speaker, we have police departments from all over Nova Scotia. We have police departments from CBRM. We have police departments here representing Trenton, representing New Glasgow, representing Westville, representing Truro, representing Spring Hill, and representing Bridgewater. And of course, we had police officers representing HRM. And I thank them all for coming. And now I know that there are some local introductions, and with that, I'll take my seat, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please introduce the bill. Order, introduce the bill first. Yeah.
Before I do, I shall introduce this very important bill. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill The title, An Act to Amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Trade Union Act, replaces... Thank you.
The honourable member for Colchester North begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Trade Union Act.
Bill 138, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Trade Union Act.
Order this bill be read a second time to future date. The honourable member for Cape Breton West on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it has been noted already with regards to the Cape Breton Regional Police, but I thought a little more point specific because of the relationship that all the Cape Breton members from both caucuses have with regards to the Cape Breton Regional Police. Give special note to the President, Jerome Kelly, who has traveled with his colleagues, and Mr. Barry Gordon, who's Communications Officer and a senior member with the Cape Breton Regional Police, and all members of the Cape Breton Regional Police Force. We offer a special welcome and ask for the full approbation of the House through you, Mr. Speaker.
Certainly not to be outdone. There's two gentlemen I'd like to introduce in the gallery, two good friends of mine and two colleagues who I worked with for a number of years. Deputy Chief Dean Ruddick and Constable Doug Williams, the Spring Hill Police Department. I'd ask them to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House as well, please. Certainly welcome all our guests to the gallery today. I think they had enough of me when they sent me here. Anyway, certainly welcome our special guests to the gallery today, and thank you for coming for the introduction of this well sought after and well waited for bill. Thank you. Any further introductions? The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I do have another introduction, and it's in a different vein today, but I have two women I would like to introduce in the gallery, in the West Gallery. Heather Hanson Dunbar is a resident of Clayton Park, and Bronwyn Richardson, also a Halifax resident, and they're here as representatives of the Private Licensed Administrators Association of Nova Scotia Child Care Centres, and I wonder if they would rise and please receive the warm welcome of the House as well. Thank you.
Again, we welcome our guests to the gallery today and hope to enjoy the proceedings. Any further introductions? The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a bill, an act to amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989 of the Motor Vehicle Act, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Bill 139, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Order this bill be read a second time to future date. The Honourable Minister of Education on introduction.
Mr. Speaker, I draw the attention members to the West Gallery where we have a visitor from Truro, Sergeant Wayne Mont of the Truro Police Force, and I ask Sergeant Mont to stand and receive the warm welcome of the House. Welcome, Wayne.
Any further bills? Notice of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on October 12th, the Education Minister told this House that he assumed there was accountability by schools and school boards for the money paid and raised by parents, staff, and students. And whereas today, October 13th, the Deputy Minister confirmed that at least $50 million in extra fees and fundraising is being collected without so much as a public accounting of the funds. And whereas when fees and fundraising represent such a major element of public school education, Nova Scotians expect to know what the money is used for. Therefore, be it resolved that the government should immediately start working with the Home and School and other school representatives to ensure full accountability for school fees and fundraising, and to understand their effect on educational and developmental opportunities for Nova Scotia school students. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Here, no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Member for Clare.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on September 25, 2004, the Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation held its 5th annual CIBC Run for Cure in Church Point and West Pubnico, and whereas Belleville Motors co-sponsored the annual Run for the Cure again this year, and whereas this year's run far exceeded the organizers' expectations by raising $11,056.83 for breast cancer research, education programs, as well as diagnosis and treatment. Therefore, it be resolved that the members of this House extend our gratitude and best wishes to Belleville Motors for their active role, as well as the countless volunteers and participants who make the national campaign against breast cancer possible each year. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask waiver of notice, please.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Mark Foote, a student at the Northeast Kings Education Centre in Canning, has been declared the fastest kid, and whereas Mark Foote won the Nike Fastest Kid in Canada competition held at Pier 21 in Halifax, and whereas Mark Foote competed against teams from across Canada at the National Nike Rundown competition in Toronto on September 5th, therefore be resolved that members of this House congratulate Mark Foote on his great performance and success and wish him success in all his future competitions. I request waiver of notice.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Board of Directors of the Eastern Passage community newspaper The Beacon have for some time sought to establish a wall of recognition honoring those who have enriched the lives of others in the community. Whereas the dedication of the first honoree, the late Harry Sarson, will be recognized October 14, 2004 at the Tallahassee Community Centre in Eastern Passage for his tireless effort on behalf of the community. Whereas the chairperson of the Board of Directors of the Beacon, Tom Harms, has been instrumental in establishing the wall of recognition. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate Tom Harms and the Board of Directors of the Beacon for creating a wall of recognition for those who have worked so hard to better the community of Eastern Passage, and I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Corey McBean of Kingston earned a Cub Scout badge and helped out a national beach cleanup, the Vancouver Aquarium's annual Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup, and whereas Corey organized a group of volunteers, including his parents Jeff and Janet McBean, to clean up Margaretville Beach, and whereas every item collected had to be counted, Corey and his team wanted to convey the important message: trash damages sea life and shoreline ecosystems. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate and acknowledge Corey McBean on his environmental awareness and active citizenship. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Eastern Shore.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas an Eastern Shore gentleman and personal friend, John Jennings, who resides with his family in the community of Worcester-Pond-Jador, has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And whereas John Jennings, a well-known business person who supports and contributes to his family and his community, has demonstrated resilience and fortitude. And whereas John Jennings recently celebrated his appreciation of life by hosting a backyard family party attended by more than 200 relatives and friends, including his wife Judy, their children Doug and Laura Lee, and several grandchildren. Therefore be it resolved that the members of this House applaud John Jennings for his courage and strength he has exhibited and continues to exhibit on his journey through life. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou West.
I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Pictou-based band Beyond Ash is spreading its wings and heading out of the Shire Town next month to perform in the Big Apple, and whereas the group has been chosen to perform in a 10-day independent music festival in New York in front of 35 of the top industry insiders in the U.S., and whereas the band will also be taking along a copy of the new CD, Wish, which is due to hit stores very shortly. Therefore, be it resolved that this Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate band members Jared Poirier, Joel Boyce, Jody Turner, and Ashley George of Beyond Ash, and wish them much success at the Music Festival in New York City. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this Tory government, instead of providing leadership and solution, continues to blame everyone but themselves for the problem it faces. And whereas yesterday in this House I asked the Minister of Tourism what he was going to do to help suffering regional tourism industry associations, and he played the same old blame game, citing Ottawa as the root of the tourism industry problems. And whereas Nova Scotians are sick and tired of this government blaming nurses, teachers, doctors, students, health authorities and school boards, unions, and the list goes on, for the inaction of this Tory government, therefore be it resolved that this government finally, after 5 years and 2 elections, take the responsibility of the affairs of this province. Mr. Speaker, I ask a waiver of notice of passage.
Request for waiver. Here no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources on introduction.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to introduce 2 distinguished guests in your gallery from the Bridgewater Police Department, and I'd ask Constable Wade Keddy and Sergeant John Collier to rise and receive a warm welcome of the House.
Thank you. We certainly welcome our guests to the gallery. The Honourable member for Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Day and Ross Transportation began their operations in June 1950 with truck on the road hauling potatoes from New Brunswick to Quebec. And whereas Day and Ross Transport Group now has 800 power units, 1,300 tractor-trailers. Mr. Speaker, I'm having fun with my words. I can't do that. Sorry.
What's wrong with?
What's wrong? No.
Order, please. The Honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Dartmouth Boys and Girls Club has played an integral part in the lives of many Dartmouth children and youth by offering programs and services that meet their needs, and whereas Helen Crawley, past volunteer and member of the Parents Committee, served the club for more than 20 years, starting as camp cook at Camp Mush Mush in the mid-70s, and whereas the National Boys and Girls Club recognized the valuable contribution made by Helen Crawley to the Dartmouth Boys and Girls Club by presenting her with the Bronze and Silver Keystone Award for parental involvement. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature thank Helen Crawley for her more than 20 years of involvement with the Dartmouth Boys and Girls Club. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia Teachers Union has stated that teachers spend an average of $500 per year of their own money to buy supplies for the classroom, and whereas the money is spent to provide basic supplies and teaching tools that support their dedication to education, and whereas the provinces of PEI and New Brunswick have recognized the professional cost by providing a tax deduction for teachers, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House request the government to introduce a similar tax deduction to recognize the exemplary work and financial contributions made by our teachers. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. Here are no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member Chester St. Margaret's.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice at a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Chester yacht employee Sandy Morash left on a trip of a lifetime Saturday morning and won't return until early in January, and whereas Sandy is working aboard the Pole Star yacht as a barkeeper for the Carlson Company, and whereas Ms. Morash is taking no small adventure as she is traveling to Central and South America through the Panama Canal while passing near Peru, Chile, Argentina, and Cape Horn before reaching the Antarctica and the Polar Circle. Therefore, be it resolved
that members of this legislature commend Ms. Sandy Morash for her hard work at the Chester Yacht Club and for being given the opportunity to take this once-in-a-lifetime cruise. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the NDP are in favor of increasing property taxes in HRM by opposing Bill 129, the Pension Benefits Act, and whereas without approval of Bill 129, property taxes will increase by $60 million over the next 4 years. And whereas regarding Bill 129, the socialist dogma of the NDP is generally acknowledged as the brainchild of the member for Halifax Fairview, therefore be it resolved that the members of the NDP caucus explain to the more than 130,000 property taxpayers in the Halifax Regional Municipality as to why they are anxious to increase property taxes for these residents without just cause. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver of notice.
Question waiver. I hear several noes. Notice is tabled. Order, please. Order, please. The honourable Premier on introduction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wish to introduce to the House 5 members of the police forces in Pictou County. We have visiting in the gallery today Corporal Joe DiPerzio from the Glasgow Police Service, Sergeant Kevin Scott of the Glasgow Police Service, Sergeant Danny Walsh of the Trenton Police Service, Constable Kelly Oikel of the Westville Police Service, and Eric McNeil, who's in the Glasgow Police Service, who as well is the current president of PANS. And I would ask our visitors to please rise and receive the welcome of the House.
Welcome our guests to the gallery today. The honourable member for Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas being in love is vital to a happy marriage, and it is a feeling that can be sustained indefinitely. And whereas such is obviously the case for Clifton and Catherine Nickerson of Barrington Passage, who celebrated their 74th wedding anniversary on Monday, and whereas Mr. and Mrs. Nickerson were married October the 11th, 1930, and have lived happily ever since. Therefore, be it resolved that all MLAs in this legislature extend our sincere and warmest wishes to Clifton and Catherine Nickerson on the celebration of their 74th wedding anniversary and wish them many more happy years together. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do this resolution on behalf of the MLA for Kings North. I hereby give notice on a future day shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Edna Kenny of Kenville has been awarded the Canada Post Literacy Award for Nova Scotia, and whereas Edna Kenny has tutored through the Lawbach program by Eric Wells and Graham Adams, and she now sits on the program's board of directors, and whereas Edna Kenny speaks to groups about the importance of the Kings County Learning Association, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate Edna Kenny and her Canada Post Literacy Award on her Canada Post Literacy Award and wish her continued success in her studies, and that members of and volunteers of the Kings County Learning Association for the important work they do. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Bridgewater and Area Kinsman Club have sponsored the Kinsman Army Cadets Corps for a lengthy period of time, and whereas the Kinsman Army Cadet Corps has experienced summer camps, summer employment, leadership skill development, and community living skills under Commanding Officer Brian Riddle, and whereas the Kinsman Army Cadet Corps has gone beyond the call of duty in providing support to the Relay for Life cancer fundraising event. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House join me in sending sincere congratulations to the Bridgewater and Area Kinsmen, Commanding Officer Brian Riddle, and especially the members of the Cadet Corps for their service in their community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Pictou East on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased to bring to your attention and to the attention of members of this chamber how lucky we are to have with us in our gallery today members of the Energy Council. They're visiting Nova Scotia and then going on to Newfoundland tomorrow. They are Texas Representative Buddy West, and Buddy's the chairman of the Energy Council, and along with Buddy is his lovely wife Shirley. We have New Mexico Senator Carol Lavelle, and Carol is the chairman of the Center for Legislative Energy and Environmental Research, and along with Carol is his wife Bobby, who had a career in the energy field herself. And to their right is, last but not least, Lori Cameron, and Lori is Executive Director of the Energy Council. And to the far left, of course, with them is Bernie McDonald from Nova Scotia's Department of Energy. And I'll ask them all to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Certainly welcome our special guests to the gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings and their stay in Nova Scotia. The Honourable Minister of Justice on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Lawrence Mawhinney has been mayor of the town of Lunenburg for 25 years, and whereas Mayor Mawhinney has been active in leadership roles with the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and whereas he has been more than a mayor of his community, he has been its voice in good times and not so good times. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly congratulates Lawrence Mawhinney on the celebration of the 25th anniversary of his election of as mayor of the town of Lunenburg. And I ask for waiver of notice and pass it without debate.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Annapolis on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to draw the attention of the House to the West Gallery so I can introduce the brains and good looks behind the operation. My wife, Andrea, is here, and I'd ask the House to...
You're a warm welcome.
We certainly welcome this very special guest to the gallery today, and our sympathies are with her. Question period begins at 2:46 and end at 4. Oh, sorry. Before question period begins, the Honourable Member for Pictou West on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased today to introduce to you in our West Gallery a number of Pictou County workers from all over Pictou County who are down here today with some concerns around pension issues. They all work at Trenton Works, or past or former or present workers at Trenton Works, and we're pleased to have them here this afternoon. And I'm going to ask them to rise and ask the House to give them a warm welcome here this afternoon.
Certainly welcome our guests to the gallery today and hope to enjoy the proceedings. Oral questions put by members. Question period begin at 2:47 and end at 4:17. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, as you will recall, I raised the issue of school fees with the Minister of Education, and he would not commit to investigating the issue. In fact, instead of addressing the problem or actually investigating the impact of school fees, the Minister seemed to deny that there was a serious funding gap that is being filled by parents. And today, Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Minister estimated that school fees and fundraising activities may bring in at least $50 million to schools across the province.
Oh, my goodness.
Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is, now that you've had more time to consider the request, will your department look at the impact of school fees and fundraising demands across the province?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I thank the honourable member for that question, and just let me clarify something, because he also said it in the resolution. He implied that the deputy minister said that there were $50 million worth of fees collected. That was a figure given by the member for Dartmouth South, and he did not say that that was the amount. Nevertheless, I do acknowledge there is a significant amount raised by parents. I will tell the honourable member that because school boards are going under the gap principle in next fiscal year, all school fees will have to be accounted for.
The honourable leader of the official opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, that's good news, Mr. Speaker, because I think the people of Nova Scotia have the right to know exactly how much is being raised by school fees. But there's another important issue here, and that is that the impact that fees have on students and parents. This is an issue that affects thousands of children. Yesterday, we tabled 2 reports on the impact of school fees. The reports identify the impact on students, and they detail the Newfoundland Action Plan to deal with the issue. In Nova Scotia, we don't know the impact of school fees because no one's had a look at it. So the minister, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, has been taking an I don't know and I don't care kind of attitude toward this. We've seen it all before. So my question to the minister is this: will you take action to determine what role the funding gap plays in this issue?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member refers to a funding gap. I think that's probably just a fair bit of rhetoric. But what I want to just tell the people, I've also had a chance to look at that Newfoundland report, and one of the things they were concerned about in Newfoundland is that under the legislation they had there, they could charge up to 40% of the cost of textbooks. And that, of course, isn't the case in Nova Scotia any longer. When I was in high school, you had to pay for 100%, but things have changed. But, Mr. Speaker, I do want to say that students in Nova Scotia do not have to pay for curricular materials.
The honourable leader of the official opposition on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the minister is just simply in denial. Home and school associations are raising money to try and keep libraries open. Right. We know that Nova Scotia comes dead last when it comes to education funding, and we now know, because the Deputy Minister said that $50 million was a conservative estimate, we now know that at least $50 million is coming from from family pockets to cover the funding gap. What we don't know is how it impacts on students and parents, and frankly, Mr. Speaker, we owe it to them to find a better way. So my question to the minister is this: when can we expect a report on this back to the legislature from your department?
The honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I want to tell the honourable member it's one thing to talk about school fees, another is school fundraising, and quite conveniently he neglects to separate between the two. When I was a parent of a high school student involved in a band program, we used to send our school band away to a trip every year, and in those years, which was a couple of years ago, the fee in those days was about $20,000. And, Mr. Speaker, we did that for quite some number of years, and they still do it. But that is an optional fee. And, Mr. Speaker, I will also tell you that there was no child denied because there was provision made.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries cannot continue to turn a blind eye to the illegal fishing crisis in Southwest Nova. In the year 2000, this government introduced a new fish buyers licensing and enforcement regulations that gives the department more authority to monitor a wider variety of activities and charge offenders. While the Federal Fisheries Department is responsible for the activity on the water, the responsibility of the province begins when the fish is brought on shore and sold. The former minister said he would hire more inspectors and crack down on illegal buying activities. My question is, Mr. Speaker, why is the minister failing to prosecute the illegal buying and selling of lobsters and other fish products?
The honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question. I want to give credit where credit is due on behalf of DFO. In the last few months, since June 1st, they have, I can give credit where credit is due, they have taken down 6 illegal lobster fishing operations, which I think has been a tremendous amount of work on their behalf. I want to say that we have hired 4 new inspectors for the Department of Enforcement, and we currently have 2 more posted for the Southwest region. Thank you.
Now, member for Digby Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is a crisis and the minister is failing to act. It's estimated that unreported cash sales from fish products totaling $200 million over the last 3 years. That translates into about 20 to 25 million in lost revenue for this province. The minister and his department have an obligation to stop illegal fish buying and exporting of it. The minister can revoke fish buying license and he can enforce provincial regulations. If there are no buyers of illegal lobsters, there will be no illegal fishery. Will the minister enforce the fish buyers' licensing and enforcement regulations in order to stop this illegal fishery?
Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as early as sometime this morning, officials from my department were discussing with DFO on the possible outcomes and how to pursue this. As I suggested and talked about in my answers to the questions yesterday, I wanted to tell you that the process being designed, or that has been designed as I announced on June 1st, that will further strengthen our enforcement program, that any license holder found in violation can expect my office to take action immediately. Thank you.
Member for Digby Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, we have to question whether the minister knows what's going on in that department. Last spring, the minister said everything was great and that he had a strategy to deal with the illegal fishery. The strategy is not working, Mr. Speaker. You have 7 provincial inspectors, and I assume they are there to enforce these regulations. Will the minister tell this House that he is prepared to make enforcement of fish buyer regulations a top priority instead of hiding behind the federal government?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
I already have.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. In the gallery today are the presidents of 11 NSGEU civil service locals from across the province. They're here to show the government their dismay at the so-called whistleblower regulations brought in a few weeks ago. They believe that these regulations do the opposite of what they should. Instead of giving public servants the ability and protection to bring forward allegations of wrongdoing, they place a gag order on civil servants. They are faced with the threat of being fired if they fail to follow the new process. Mr. Speaker, in other jurisdictions, there are legislated protections for those who wish to report wrongdoing. So my question for the Premier is this: why has your government refused to bring in legislation that amounts to real protection for whistleblowers instead of these punishing regulations?
The Honourable the Premier.
I refer that to the minister responsible.
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the regulations do on wrongdoing is set forth a set of regulations that give a clear process for employees to report any wrongdoing that they may encounter.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the civil servants in the gallery today know that what the minister just said is that the government doesn't care what others think. They just did what they wanted to do. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the government did ask the NSGEU for comments on draft regulations, and then they refused to listen to the feedback that they got. They just went ahead and pushed through the flawed regulations. They ignored the NSGEU's concerns after a poll of public servants found that over 1/4 had witnessed wrongdoing or unsafe conditions. So my question for the Premier is this: why did your government pretend to consult with the most affected stakeholder when you didn't intend to listen to what they had to say?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And if the member opposite goes through the regulations, there is clear identification of processes to be used by employees who wish to make reports. The advice that the regulation provides is very clear, and it protects the employee.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, all members of this House are aware that last year the Ham government was viewed as the most secretive government in Canada by the Canadian Association of Journalists. They were given the award for a year-long pattern of secrecy. This kind of secrecy is virtually assured of continuing under these new regulations. We know that public servants and their representatives are prepared to work with the government hand in hand to stem corruption, abuse, and wrongdoing, but this government isn't willing to do that. So my question is to the Premier is, why does your government refuse to work with instead of against civil servants in this province?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think that the government has demonstrated a willingness to work with civil servants. Recently, for example, we have come through some successful labour negotiations that were handled, I think, in a very appropriate manner, and we look forward over the next number of months to completing the outstanding issues that we have with public sector employees. I believe that the working relationship that we are establishing with public sector workers is at the current time healthy and improving.
The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, it appears it's time that the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries be reminded of what his own party has had to say about illegal fishing in the past. What we have is a minister who fails to grasp that he has a leadership role to play in the crackdown of illegal fishing. On November 18, 1998, the former member from Argyll, Neil LeBlanc, then the Tory fisheries critic, told this House, quote, "No matter what happens, the province has a responsibility of showing leadership," end quote. He went on further to say, quote, "So the point of the matter is, you either lead by example and put the penalties in place so the fishery people of this province will know that you are serious and that you will follow through with them. You can come here in the House and make general comments all the time. What this party wants is specifics." So my question to the Minister is, why won't he take the advice of his so-called political mentor, the former member from Argyll, and take a leadership role and enforce provincial regulations to stop illegal lobster fishing in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question. We are investigating this issue, and we will take this very seriously, unlike the member opposite, that this is a serious problem in the Southwest, and we will do everything that we can to stop this illegal activity.
The Honourable Member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when you start seeing that there's violence that is being done in areas of law-abiding citizens out of frustration that see that their livelihood is being threatened, and then the minister suggests that someone's not taking this serious, the fact that his department has not cracked down on this is why we are calling upon the minister today to take action, to put an end to this before lives are put at stake and a fishery is put into jeopardy. His predecessor also said on May 21st, 1998, quote, "You are the spokesman of Nova Scotia, and if DFO is not doing it, then you have the responsibility. You have to take the leadership to basically make sure that happens," end quote. The buying of illegal lobster is clearly within the jurisdiction of the Provincial Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries. So my question is when is the minister going to demonstrate leadership and prosecute now the illegal buying of lobster in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
As the member opposite can completely understand, this is a very complicated issue. There are a number of agencies involved in it. When there is clear evidence that there is wrongdoing happening, we will prosecute to the full extent of the regulation.
The Honourable Member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let's go with the last quote. On November 19, 1998, his predecessor, the member from Argyll, told the then Provincial Minister of Fisheries, quote, "I have bought lobsters before, and I stand here today and say, if I were to buy illegal lobsters and you are not putting the hammer down on me in whatever way you can, with whatever sanctions you can, then you are not doing your job," end quote. He went on to say, are you auditing their books? Are you going to every purchase slip that they have? My question to the minister today is when can we expect that the Minister of Fisheries to do his job as suggested by his own predecessor by bringing the hammer down on the illegal fish trade instead of his current do-nothing approach?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell you that the MLA for Argyll, the current one, and the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries is doing his job and is going to crack down. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is, again, for the Premier. Jane Van Toft worked as a secretary at the South Shore District Health Authority for 17 years. Ms. Van Toft was fired in January of 2003 after she complained about intimidating behavior and harassment. In May of this year, the Labor Standards Tribunal found the South Shore DHA guilty of wrongful dismissal. The new whistleblowers policy doesn't apply to bodies such as district health authorities, even though they are provincial government agencies. So my question to the Premier is, how can employees of these organizations feel safe reporting wrongdoing?
Good question. The Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I have no personal knowledge of the singular matter that the member brings forward, but you know, if there is an issue of an injustice, if you were to make the government aware of the issue, we will make sure that every worker receives the full benefit of the law.
Now we'll leave the official opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the problem is that there is no law that applies to these workers. That is exactly the point we're trying to make. There was no protection in 2003 for Ms. Van Toft, and there isn't any adequate protection today. The reality is that Ms. Van Toft was awarded 15 months of pay plus interest, but to date, Mr. Speaker, she has not received a single cent of it. She was not awarded her legal costs, which were more than $20,000. So my question for the Premier is, why should any other government employee in Nova Scotia report wrongdoing, given Ms. Van Toft's experience?
Down with the Premier.
Yeah. Thank you very much. There's two issues here, Mr. Speaker. One is the individual case, and if the member opposite would provide the information that he has to the government will have a look at the case, because we promote fairness. But the other thing I can say, you do bring a very important issue to the attention of the House. It is the government's intention to extend the regulations to occur to these agencies such as the district health authorities.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Well, the problem, of course, is that the current regulations are not adequate, Mr. Speaker. I hope the government does learn from the Van Toft case and realizes that employees need better protection that is enshrined in law. I've just set out the salient facts of the Van Toft case for the Premier, so I want to ask this question. It's been nearly 2 years since her unjust dismissal took place. Will the Premier ensure that Ms. Van Toft gets her settlement in a fair and timely manner?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, if the member opposite would provide the government with the details that obviously he has, the government will make sure that that employee receives all of the entitlements that her employment should make available to her.
The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, correctional officers are hardworking and dedicated public servants, and they deserve our gratitude and respect for the difficult jobs they do. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, that I am puzzled by the Minister of Justice's obvious disregard for their concerns. We all know that the correctional officers have been without a collective agreement for quite some time, and at present there are over 100 grievances that appear to be ignored by the Minister and his officials. So my question to the Minister of Justice is, does the Minister respect the right of his employees to file grievances? And if he does, why is his department not acting on them on a timely and appropriate manner?
The Honourable Minister of Justice. Order, please. While we appreciate the attendance of guests in the gallery, I'd ask you to not respond either positively or negatively what happens on the floor of the House, please. Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member raises a very good question. I first of all can begin by telling you that both the Department of Justice and this minister respects the contribution of our correctional workers. They are very valuable workers to the employer in Nova Scotia who often work under very, very difficult situations. As part of the collective bargaining process that has been reached between those employees and the government of Nova Scotia, as the member indicated, they have the right to file grievances. That collective bargaining process sets out the manner in which grievances are to be dealt with. I regret that sometimes those grievances aren't heard as fast as both the employer and employees' representatives would like.
Honourable Member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when you have a correctional officer that gets disciplined or fired. And they have to wait at home with their family for up to 2 years before this department and this minister is willing to even have their case heard and have their case finally arbitrated. That's an awful strange way for this Minister of Justice to show respect to the correctional workers that he claims to have so much respect for. Correctional officers are waiting up to 2 years to get their grievances heard, and in some cases it's clear that it's causing very real hardship. These employees, Mr. Speaker, as we all know, do not have the right to strike, and it would appear that the minister's actions would lead us to conclude that because of this lack of right to strike, the department is dragging its feet on dealing with these issues. So my question again is, does the minister believe that these long delays in having these grievances heard would lead us to believe that this is a delay tactic on behalf of his department?
Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quite simply, there is no delay tactic on the part of the department. These matters are set to be dealt with. There is a process. Unfortunately, the process takes longer than anybody would wish, and if there's any particular cases, I'd be glad to talk to the member in question about them to see what I can do.
Member Richmond, on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when we raise matters like this in the House, it's quite clear it's because of the frustration with the government and their lack of listening to the concerns from the membership and from their union representatives, which is why we raise this issue here today. The minister's department has said that they do not have the amount of staff required to hear these grievances on a timely manner, yet the minister refuses to hire or to contract out the necessary employees to deal with these matters and have them finally dealt with. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I ask, will the minister stand in this House today and give his personal guarantee that if he has as much respect for the correctional workers of this province as he would have us believe, that he will ensure that these grievances that are currently outstanding will be heard and dealt with by the end of this year?
Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, and I can indicate to the honourable member my commitment to check to see if there's anything can be done to accelerate the resolution of these matters. We do not want these matters to continue along without resolution. As the member knows, justice delayed can be justice denied.
The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question to you is to the Premier. This summer I wrote to the Premier on behalf of the approximately 200 current and former employees of Trenton Works, a number of which are here today in our gallery, and concerning their access to their Hawker Siddeley pension monies. And the reply I received back from the Premier was that no changes were planned. This pension money with Hawker Siddeley started in 1969 and became locked in various financial institutions after 1988. I will table that agreement. Some of those workers chose an individual RRSP, and some remained in the company plan now administered by AIG funds. But in both cases, the funds were locked in and not available to these workers. So my question, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, what do you say today to these workers, some who have encountered financial hardship and who need access to some of these funds?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I refer that to the minister responsible for the Pension Act.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the question. We certainly have had some discussions with the department on this, and it's unfortunate that the employees feel that they're in the situation that they're in, but they do have some options with regards to transferring, if they're over age 55, to a life income fund, and there are some options that they can explore. Unfortunately, I do believe they've exhausted most options in this circumstance.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West, on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going back to the Premier since Trenton Works is in his riding, and these are his constituents as well as mine from throughout Pictou County. Some employees thought that recent changes announced by the Superintendent of Pensions in this province might provide some relief. And I will table Form 9 of the Pension Regulation Division that allows workers at age 54 to draw up to $16,000 in a life income fund. However, not all financial institutions are compliant. We have heard that some banks and insurance companies are not in agreement, and I have a letter, Mr. Speaker, I'll file from London Life that says we, London Life, are not offering this feature. So again, Mr. Premier, why did your government decide to give discretion on this to the financial institution and not to the workers?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I refer that to the minister responsible.
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If there are instances where there are concerns that financial institutions are not compliant, they should bring those to the attention of the Superintendent of Pensions to look into.
The honourable member for Pictou West on your final supplementary.
Well, strike three and you're out. So again, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask to the Premier. Pension laws are complicated, but really that's no excuse why we delay or deny benefits to our workers that really need it. Provinces like Ontario, they've taken positive steps to make locked-in arrangements more accessible by employees in case of financial hardship, which this province has failed to do thus far. These employees, Mr. Speaker, are not getting any younger, and in fact, some have already passed on without being able to access the money if they really need it. So, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, when will you ensure these workers get a fair redress to this issue?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And if the member opposite truly wants to be helpful, he could provide to the government and to the pension officer the names of financial institutions that are failing to comply with the law of Nova Scotia.
The honourable member, Cape Breton West.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2001, the Nova Scotia Department of Transportation and Public Works issued a document called Nova Scotia's Primary Secondary Highway Systems, a 10-year needs program. And to quote on page 12, it says that the province is requesting that Ottawa sign a 5-year, $270 million highways agreement to be cost-shared on a 50-50 basis. Since coming to power in 1999, the government has only signed one agreement, which is only a fraction of that. When can we expect another federal-provincial highways agreement that will address this deficit?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Probably with a change of government at the federal level.
The honourable member Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's important to be an optimist. I'll give him credit for that. Mr. Speaker, last year, during the election year, the provincial government spent over $116.4 million on highway, capital highway, and bridge projects. However, this year, a year later after, they reduced that funding by 20%, some $24 million. Ironically, that reduction came at the expense of constituencies like Richmond County that went from a capital expenditure of $1.2 million down to $23,800, and Victoria County that went from $8.1 million down to $2.4 million, and so on. Mr. Speaker, you hit the jackpot, so I'm not going to go there. My question to the minister.
Order, please. I'll member Cape Breton West on his supplementary.
Why has the government reduced capital expenditure on highway and bridge construction?
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member Cape Breton West has the floor.
Well, I know it's an emotional issue for some Tory backbenchers, Mr. Speaker. My question to the minister is, why, in the face of the growing deficit and needs on highway repair and maintenance and capital construction and bridge repair, have you reduced funding by 20%?
Transportation and Public Works.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we haven't reduced funding by 20%, and to infer that we have reduced funding to Cape Breton by citing Victoria County and Richmond County, I think the honourable member has to look at the experience over the last 4 years in Cape Breton, where we have had the majority of our capital expenditures per district, Mr. Speaker, in that area. So last year, I believe, in Cape Breton County alone on bridges, we spent something in the order of about $20 million.
Member Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he's not going to answer the question, so I'll shift the focus just slightly. On the RIM program, ironically, the department has all the constituencies across the province itemized within the department as to who is getting what money. It's unprecedented because, as I recall in a previous government, they say you're not supposed to identify constituency concerns. And most of the money seems to have been spent in Tory-held ridings. to the detriment of other ridings like Halifax Atlantic, 69,000, Preston, 37,000, and so on, while the others get hundreds of thousands. So my question to the minister is, if you're supposed to have a non-patronage highway roads policy, why have you broken down the expenditure based on constituency basis? It's
Minister of Transportation, Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, the RIM program is acclaimed not only by the department but by the motoring public of Nova Scotia as being the most successful program the Department of Transportation has ever put into effect. And Mr. Speaker, further to that, Mr. Speaker, the amount spent on RIM programs this year was approximately $12-point-something million, which is roughly $2 million over last year.
The honourable member of Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Justice with regard to the correctional workers who are here today in the House, as the Minister is well aware. And they're seeking answers as to why this government and this Minister and his department have a pattern of dragging their feet with regard to actions with the correctional workers. The government's offer to the workers, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, in collective bargaining is insulting. A paltry wage increase, denying the right to automatic wage increases based on seniority, and the rollback of sick leave benefits, Mr. Speaker. So I want to ask the Minister, why has this government not bargained in good faith with the correctional workers, taking a position that is seeking to roll back benefits for the correctional workers?
The honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can indicate to the honourable member quite simply that there is a collective bargaining process ongoing. I've indicated to those correctional workers I met with outside that I would meet with members from the bargaining unit tomorrow to discuss their concerns. I take very seriously their concerns, and there is a collective bargaining process, one which I hope will come very soon to a conclusion successfully.
Member Cole Harbour Eastern Passage on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, you know, that collective bargaining process leads to my second question, because what we have is another pattern. You know, it's been almost a year. I think it's the end of this month since the collective agreement ended. It's been since June of 2003 since the union has asked for negotiations to begin. And at every stage, at every step, this government has dragged its feet and tried to prevent the negotiations from proceeding. And what we had, even this last year, when negotiations were going nowhere, the union asked for binding arbitration, and this government again dragged its feet in appointing the panel that will deal with the binding arbitration. So my question to the minister is, will he commit in this House today to stop stalling the arbitration process and work with the correctional workers to expedite the process to ensure we can get a final collective agreement with the workers?
The honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can indicate that this minister is not in any way delaying that collective bargaining process. I am committed to these matters being resolved fully, and I only wish that the parties could have reached an agreement, but fortunately you do have a mechanism set out in legislation which will allow for a resolution of the matter.
Member Cole Harbour Eastern Passage on your final supplementary.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to hear the minister in this House is putting on the record that he's committed to making this happen and isn't dragging his feet. Maybe he has to start telling the people in the corrections division of his department that that's what they should be doing as well. Because stalling on the collective bargaining isn't bad enough, Mr. Speaker, but this department is slow to comply with orders under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Orders were issued by the Minister of Environment and Labour's Department against the Central Nova Correctional Facility in May 2002, ordering that facility to develop a safety program, just basic in any workplace. Yet it took over 2 years for that facility to come forward and finalize a safety program. So I want to ask the minister, will this minister take immediate action to ensure the management of his correctional division starts recognizing the need for a safe and healthy workplace in and for correctional workers?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I can indicate to you that I am very satisfied that the leadership in the Correctional Services Division understands completely the importance of safety in the workplace, but for the benefit of everyone, I will obviously re-emphasize the concern to make sure that in the future there are no delays. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre.
Speaker. My question is also for the Minister of Justice, Speaker. We just heard about the plight of correctional workers in this province who are trying to get a fair deal from this very minister and this government, Mr. Speaker. We know the government is stalling on collective bargaining process and that it took 2 years to implement adequate OH&S standards at Central Nova Correctional Facility. The government is not only stalling these workers, but they're also stalling correctional worker Mr. Donnie Wilson on a dismissal arbitration, Mr. Speaker. After an unblemished career in correctional services, he was dismissed, is now being stalled for over a year for an arbitration hearing. My question to you, Minister, is why won't you treat this worker in a fair and timely manner?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Speaker, I can indicate to the honourable member that I believe that it serves no one's interest to delay arbitration of these matters. I am going to do what I can, but as the honourable member also knows, it takes two parties to set down these matters for hearing, and there are sometimes delays. I'm not aware of the specific situation, the issues in specific situation, but I can tell you it takes both parties to set down one of these matters.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre on your first supplementary.
This minister knows very well about the delay tactics of his department in particular. I'll also tell this minister one thing, that, Mr. Speaker, if the people that Donnie Morrison was sworn to guard, if they were faced with these, Donnie Wilson, Mr. Speaker, excuse me, if they were faced with these delays, they'd be thrown out of court for non-timely hearing, Mr. Speaker. It's as simple as that. Donnie's worked for the Correctional Centre facility for many years, and after one perceived offence was summarily dismissed, Mr. Speaker. Despite this government's decision to stall him, the federal government was on his side, Mr. Speaker, when they gave him employment insurance because they said they believed he was fired unjustly. So, Mr. Minister, through you, Mr. Speaker, why is this man not being granted an arbitration in a reasonable time frame?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As I indicated to the honourable member, I am not aware of the specific reasons why this matter has not been heard to the present. All I can do is take the matter under advisement and based on the member's suggestion today.
The honourable member Cape Breton Centre on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the minister knows that I've contacted his office over a month ago on this very issue, and to say that he's unaware of it, you know, I find that hard to swallow, Mr. Speaker. This problem has caused Mr. Wilson extreme hardship, as you can only well imagine. He's had to file for personal bankruptcy, and untold medical problems, Mr. Speaker, because he was summarily dismissed by this government. Minister, your department had over a year to deal with this. Why can't you hold this arbitration hearing before the end of the month and bring a resolution to Mr. Wilson and his family?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you. As I indicated to the honourable member, I will take the matter under advisement and report back.
The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question's for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, caucuses of all political stripes respect the great service that Nova Scotia hearing and speech centres provide to the residents of our province. Earlier this spring, our caucus, and I'm certain other caucus, were briefed on a proposal brought forward called A Sound Start. Included in this proposal was a program that would ensure that all newborns in our province had their hearing tested before they left the hospital, similar to a program already offered in Brunswick and PEI. A Sound Start, Mr. Speaker, would also provide much-needed speech interventions for preschoolers, the age when these interventions are most effective. My first question to the Minister is, would the Minister agree that the Sound Start proposal currently before government is worthy of funding?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. Mr. Speaker, it is my belief that that money spent on addressing the healthcare needs of youth is probably the most effective money that we can spend in terms of ensuring that we have citizens who live long, productive lives, and that is certainly the attitude that I bring toward the administration of my portfolio.
The honourable member for Clare on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to hear that the Minister of Health is in support of this proposal. After all, Mr. Speaker, it would be a positive step if this government were to invest in a program that would detect problems early and begin to correct them when it is most effective to do so. And when you do a universal hearing program, you detect problems earlier and you're able to make intervention sooner. So again, to the Minister, in light of additional federal funding, could the Minister please confirm whether or not a Sound Start is on the priority list for funding?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I can confirm to the honourable member that one of the great challenges we have now within the Department of Health, of course, is to match the funding which we've received from Ottawa, which is an amount of $64 million for this year, with the needs that we were able to identify prior to the First Ministers' Conference of $175 million. Now, Mr. Speaker, the exercise that we're involved in, of course, is an exercise of priorities within that shortfall, and that is something that is very challenging. But again, the honourable member brings forward the appropriateness of spending money on programs to assist our youth, and that is one of the things which we try to keep to the fore at all times in these discussions.
Honourable Member for Clare, on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, currently before the House is a bill that legislates Francophone services in our province. However, Mr. Speaker, if a preschooler happens to be Francophone and needs speech therapy, there is no one, and I repeat, no one at the Nova Scotia Hearing and Speech Centre who can provide these services. So given that this government is supportive of Francophone services when it comes to government operations, my question to the Minister is, could the Minister please indicate whether he is willing to provide funding to the Nova Scotia Hearing and Speech Centres so that they can begin delivering speech therapy to Francophone preschoolers?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The honourable members, the timing of his question is very interesting because on the weekend I'm going to be in Vancouver with the federal provincial health ministers, and one of the topics that the federal health minister wants to discuss is the issue of providing language services, and I can assure the honourable member that I will bring his question to the attention of the federal health minister and make a very strong, impassioned plea on his behalf.
The honourable member for Kimberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Education. Over the last number of months, I've been looking into school suspensions across this province. Mr. Speaker, I was very surprised to find out that the Education Department has not done any analysis on student suspensions, and it does not keep records yearly. We've received totals from most of the school boards in the province, and the results are alarming. It looks like Nova Scotian schools may be averaging almost 20,000 suspensions a year. And we're still waiting for the statistics from one particular school board. So my question to the Minister is, what effort has your department made to investigate student suspensions across this province?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member does raise a good point. People are suspended for various reasons. The suspensions, as I understand it, are reported on a monthly basis to the school board, and we receive them as part of the school board reports.
The honourable member for Kimberley Prospect, on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The lack of information on student suspension and the difficulty obtaining the information is really very serious. There are 20,000 suspensions, or almost, and we know very little about why there are so many in our province. Without an analysis of the numbers, We don't know if the numbers are increasing or decreasing. We don't know what we could be doing to address the problem. We don't know how many school days are lost. We do not know the ethnicity of some of the students or the number that are repetitively being suspended. My question to the minister is, will your department undertake an analysis of student suspensions and report back to this House?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the matter of student suspensions is a matter for school boards, as the honourable member knows. The department does receive information on a monthly basis, and I can tell the honourable member, at least in one or two school boards with which I am personally familiar, that analysis of suspension by the categories or examples of categories that he gave are indeed done.
Member of Timothy Prospect on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, back in 2002, this Department of Education said they would be tracking school suspensions. They would be coordinating the collection of information. They would be providing follow-up when it comes to the suspensions. Type of, reason for, days lost. What we really need here is for the department to look at the statistics in Nova Scotia and come up with some solutions. So, Mr. Speaker, my question again to the minister is, can we expect your department to take any action in a leadership role as we look at the very serious problem of school suspensions across this province?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, there are a number of items that come up in the monthly meeting with superintendents. And for example, the issue of school fees, which was raised in this legislature today, was a topic raised by the deputy at the meeting of the superintendents earlier this month. Like the school fees, the department reviews things from time to time, and I will endeavor, Mr. Speaker, to find out exactly, in reference to what the honourable member said, where the department is in relationship to that data and report back.
The honourable member for Annapolis.
My question is for the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage. Yesterday I asked the Minister to provide me with the budget allotted to the regional tourism industry associations, and I thank him for that. Even with the government's spin on the numbers, the funding is desperately low. The RTIA's funding represents about 2% of the department's budget. These associations support the province's goal of doubling tourism revenue by the year 2012 and work with more than 2,000 stakeholders and community groups to grow and advance the industry. So my question is, how are the RTIAs supposed to assist the tourism industry to grow when they are so underfunded?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the member. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that the RTIAs do play a vital role in our local regions, Mr. Speaker. Not only do we provide money for fee for service, also destination marketing opportunities, but Mr. Speaker, they also are a conduit for local regional groups for other programs throughout the department.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the question is not what kind of a job they're doing. The question is the amount of funding they're receiving. Out of the funding that we received yesterday, the numbers that I received yesterday from the minister, less than half of that is actually provided to the RTIAs. Most of it is fee for service, which they are doing the job that the department should be doing. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the minister indicated that he was not willing to sit down with me and representatives from the RTIAs to discuss the funding level. The minister must recognize that the funding is inadequate. So will the minister commit to increasing the core funding for the RTIAs so they have the resources to enhance tourism industry in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I through you to the member. I find it very surprising, Mr. Speaker, that the member would question the vital role that regional tourism industry associations are playing, Mr. Speaker, because we very much follow the same model as the previous government, Mr. Speaker, in that respect, because they do play a vital role, knowing the local regions better than anyone, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, always with any consideration of budget measures, that will be considered in the upcoming budget.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis on your final supplementary.
I wasn't worried about the role that the RTIAs are playing, and I recognize that the minister said they are following the lead of the previous government. The difference is, Mr. Speaker, the numbers are declining. Under the previous government, the numbers for tourism were increasing. So my question is, why won't the minister do something concrete for the regional tourism associations?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, the member is wrong. The member should check his numbers, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, under this government, Mr. Speaker, we have seen tourism numbers in this province grow. Under this province, Mr. Speaker, we hit $1.3 billion. Under this government, Mr. Speaker, under leadership of this Premier, Mr. Speaker, this government has made a difference for tourism and will continue to make a difference for tourism in this province.
The Honourable Member for Halifax-Shabakto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question will be for the Minister of Environment. Mr. Speaker, the residents of Digby County are again worried about the future of their community. The Hyatt Nova Scotia Springwater Company, directed by Mr. John Hyatt of New Hampshire, owns about 1,000 acres of land at Gulliver's Cove on Digby Neck. According to the local office of the Department of Environment, Hyatt is running tests right now, and they're expecting an application for water withdrawal very soon. According to a ministerial briefing note we have seen, there may be plans to bottle up to 200,000 bottles a day. So, Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the Minister could tell us how he plans to deal with this application when it comes into him and his department.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, we'll deal with this application in the same manner we deal with other applications that come in to the department. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Halifax-Shabakto on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's exactly because of that problematic attitude that we're asking the question. The last time the residents of Digby County looked to the Department of Environment for help, they found none. This time, they are hoping they will find more open communication. Hyatt may also propose installing a wharf at Gulliver's Cove. Clearly, we're talking about a major project in this case. Local residents are worried about their drinking water wells. They're wondering about social and economic costs. The Minister will know that Digby Neck is narrow, freshwater supplies are fragile. So very specifically to the Minister, I would like to know, will you ensure that a Class 2 environmental assessment will be done on this project when it comes forward?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We certainly will look at all the information that comes forward to us, if it comes forward to us, and make a decision on what type of assessment would be appropriate at that point in time.
Halifax-Shabakto on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I think will be shocked to hear that the last time the province of Nova Scotia held a Class 2 environmental assessment on anything, it was 1998. Mr. Speaker, our freshwater supply is one of our most valuable natural resources, yet we continue to give it away at bargain prices. A company could withdraw about 2 million litres a day and pay the province just slightly over $100 for the whole year in fees. What I would like to hear from the Minister, Mr. Speaker, is will he ensure that a cost-benefit analysis is done on the Hyatt proposal before it is ever allowed to go ahead?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We certainly would endeavour to do a thorough investigation of the application and look at all aspects that might be involved with the application prior to giving any approvals.
The Honourable Member for Victoria Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, I was recently approached by Mrs. Kate Hennessy and her husband Kevin Rowland of Blackrock, whose son Noah Rowland is diagnosed with high-functioning autism. Noah is a grade 2 student at Bulletree Elementary School, and his autism causes a severe social interaction and a communication deficit. As a result, Noah finds changes difficult. Children with high-functioning autism need advanced notices of impending changes of their surroundings. So, Mr. Speaker, you could understand the disbelief Ms. Hennessy felt last month when she learned that her son's teacher's aide, his facilitator in dealing with changes, was replaced by a total stranger overnight. The child's fragile world was rocked of stability and continuity, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the Minister is simple. How could the needs of this student be ignored?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the situation which the honourable member brings to the floor of the House is one which occurs from time to time in the province, and we're acutely aware of how parents and students feel when somebody whom they come to rely on is moved. The fact of the matter is that indeed we are aware of this situation. This, unfortunately, is a matter of a collective agreement. And the collective agreement that is in place, these people are members of a particular labor association, and under the agreement, it's like many other union seniority clauses that unfortunately sometimes things don't work out necessarily for the best of everyone.
The honourable member for Victoria Lakes on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, while my question should have been a simple one, it is not. A substantial change like this to Noah's daily routine has serious consequences. Mr. Speaker, he now has a new teacher's aide. Because of the change, another student, Jordy McCaskill, who is a challenged student, also now has a new teacher's aide. It'll take months for these children to adjust to the change, months for them to become familiar and comfortable with another person, Mr. Speaker. And because of this action, Noah was effectively denied education. It resulted in Noah being out of school because to send him back would have created more misery. What's worse, Mr. Speaker, is that no one, not the school, not the teacher, not the principal, nor the parents, let alone Noah, were aware that this change was about to take place. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is, how could a decision like this be made